Yeah. Let's just say that this is episode 1, and then we're just trying to figure it out. Honestly,
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, this is 990 podcast, episode 1, and we're just trying to figure it out.
Exactly. That is exactly what we're doing here.
My name is Ray, and
Yeah. My name is Jay. There you go, Ray and Jay.
that's it. But Jay, can we talk about just kind of like the basis of this podcast? That way, you just can kind of get a brief description or idea of what we're having here. Or
Yeah, absolutely. So, just some context and backstory. Ray and I, we used to work together. Worked together for years. I always had a really, really good relationship with him, and when he stopped working with me, we just kept in contact. We've been friends ever since. And life gets busy. I think maybe I see Ray maybe a couple of times a month, if that.
Yep.
Usually it'll be a coffee and beer type of situation. We just end up talking story. Usually that ends up just being a couple of hours of us just kind of brain dumping on thoughts we have about everything. And Ray just had this idea to put the camera on, put mics on, and see what comes out of it. So that's what this is.
Yeah, and I Jay is like, I always thought of Jay when we were working and stuff. Every time he responds to something, I'm like, oh man, that's a really good response, Joe. It's very concise. It's very applicable, and in a way that I don't know. It's the most efficient way to get something across. So like rhetoric, Jay, rhetoric, is that right?
Yeah.
Rhetoric, it was such a huge thing in college for me. I found out that it was super fun for me.
Yeah.
And I found out it was the way that you communicate things.
Absolutely.
And like how you say it, what you say, who to say it to, when to say it to. Bro, that's like, I was just so amazed at that whole concept of what this is, because that's been my whole thing. Like growing up, it's like the way that I kind of took my steps is like, okay, I got to communicate this thing, but how do I do it in the best way, or to who, in order to get my thing across. So I feel like communication is such a huge thing. And when we worked at, I was going to say where we're, but at our working place.
Yes.
I thought, man, Joe's probably the best person that writes emails in terms of communicating and talking. Not just emails, but even emails are even more. It's even more concise and more efficient.
I am the email master. You need a master class on emails. That's me.
And bro, he's not using Chat GPT. That wasn't even a thing then.
Yes, it wasn't.
But that's kind of like the base. And I thought, man, would be sick. Because yeah, Joe, as you're saying, bro, we'd probably link up maybe once or twice a month and just drink or talk story, catch up. And I was like, man, we gotta record this because it's just fun. Like,
I think what's dope is there's this genuine respect and candor that we have with each other because we are friends. But what's interesting is just points of view. Ray and I, we share a lot of interest, but we also have a lot of varying viewpoints on things, and it's based off of life experiences. And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to kind of tackle in this podcast. Just the different life experiences we have, just based off of our age differences. We're both married, our relationships, raise a new parent, things like that. And I think these are just cool topics to talk about. These are things we would have been doing anyway without Mike. So, right. Here to just share with the world.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. With that out of the way, recent pickups. Yeah. Do you know one off the top of your head right now?
Yeah, well, I got my phone in front of me. I shouldn't be advertising too much here, but got the new iPhone 15 Pro.
Let's go with that. What do you like about the new 15 Pro?
Honestly, I will say this. It's a great phone. I think that if you had anything prior to the 14 Pro, it is an amazing phone. It's a great upgrade. There's a lot of hype around it because of the look, the titanium, and all that. But yeah, it's crazy. There's such a demand for the device right now. I know it's back ordered till mid-November at this point.
Is it already?
Yeah. So if you got it, you got it, and I think that's great. I'm happy with it so far. But that was my recent pickup.
So funny because I thought you meant I got my phone here to have to look at the list of things that I bought.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh no, that just clicked like,
no,
just
there you go.
I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No problem. Yeah. Got the natural titanium there. Probably the most popular configuration, but yeah.
I think the titanium's super solid. I mean, just far ahead from the other colors.
Definitely. What about you?
Recent pickups, Man, it's tough now because, well, in my head, I was saying I gotta ask or I gotta consult with Joss
Yep.
about what things to buy.
Ah,
But if I look on my Amazon, just a lens for photography.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I still do photos on the side, but one of my friends just got engaged, and bro, they're like not hiring, they're renting out the whole chair, the throne chair stuff,
Oh, okay.
and kind of bougie people. Shout out Mario, shout out Rexy. But they're pretty bougie, super fun guys. But I figured, oh man, I need a new lens for this.
Okay.
So
Dope.
yeah,
Dope.
that's about it, bro.
Nice.
Recent pickups.
Hey.
You watch anything recently?
What am I watching? Okay, so I'm a couple years behind on this. I
Okay.
just finished Narcos Mexico. I watched the original one, Colombia one.
Wait. Before I get mixed
Yeah.
up, is there a original one?
Yeah, so there's gonna be Narcos, which is gonna be focusing on Colombia.
We're talking about the Netflix one.
Netflix, yep. So
Okay,
that's
I
the
just want to make sure there's no other like.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
that's the Pablo Escobar one. That
Pablo,
one
okay.
was the one that came out first, and then after that they had Narcos Mexico. Interesting stuff. So I mean, what's cool about it is, even though it is based off of real world events, they took a lot of liberties. They basically kind of built this Narcos universe where there is some crossover in the stories, and you do
Okay.
have some shared characters, and the storylines are actually coinciding at the same timeline, which is kind of dope. So you kind of see how the drug trade went from Colombia and evolved into Mexico just based off of the trafficking. And I don't know, it's really interesting. I think for me, I'm always interested in just real world events, how things played out.
Yeah.
But for me, I think when I think about the things that I like to watch the most, there's usually an element of crime for some reason. Yeah, I think that for me, I always look at it from the point of view of if people were in a different scenario, they had different life circumstances, what would they do with this intelligence
Yeah.
and talent?
Yeah.
And, when you think about these drug kingpins that have done so much bad in their lives and caused so much, negative things. What could they have done if they had a different life?
Yeah.
Because obviously that intelligence, that level of intelligence, the coordination, the logistics, everything is there
Yeah.
to build a multi-billion-dollar business.
Right.
So it's always fascinating. So I just finished that. That's the last thing I saw.
When I think about like the crime in just Narcos in
Yep.
general, I've
Yep.
watched the Pablo Escobar one.
Yeah, that one was good.
Yeah, it was solid. Yeah, that was a good series. I think there's a scene from, is it Sicario?
Yep.
At the very end. Okay. There's different ones, but it was a scene where Del Toro is at the end and he's just kind of he pulls up to this guy's. I'm assuming that's a drug kingpin.
Oh, yep.
Pulls up to the family dinner and just kind of not interrogates, but I don't want to go through the whole scene.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
okay, you know what you're talking about, yeah.
Yep.
But as you're talking about this series and how they would live a different life, in my head it's like, man, how do you know? How do you do all of these things knowing that it's wrong? Like clearly it's wrong, and have a family at the same time and have that love for that family. So it's very too extreme.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm like-
I'm not a criminal psychologist, but I think a lot of times when you look at people that have that type of duality, it's like sociopathic behavior where you can disassociate the bad, and that's not going to come into this life because this is the good.
Sure.
I'm a good father, I'm a good husband.
Yeah.
Like I'm a good son or whatever. Like I do good things for my community, but this other part of me, this is separate, and I think that's usually what happens. There's a disassociation of like, hey. Or sometimes maybe it's just means to make the ends, right? Where like I need to do this in order to get this, and
Yeah. So I think about that, and I think of how like what goes through the mind of that type of people when you talk about duality. And it's like, how does how does conviction not enter that space?
oh, for sure,
So I'm
definitely.
like, I mean, you look at other people's families, it's like, how
Right.
can you not empathize with that? But
Well,
I don't know.
I think when you look at like family structure in general, we tend to think selfishly just as humans. I feel like, our nuclear family, there's this idea that we've kind of been brought up in society that it's us against the world. In an idealistic society, you have the sense of community. You
Yeah.
have this responsibility for taking care of others, your neighbors, and whatnot. But the bottom line, like, if society were to fall, who do you rely on? And it's most times it's your immediate family. So I think a lot of these folks, they look at it like nothing else matters except my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. But again, I'm not a drug kingpin, so I wouldn't I wouldn't know where to begin with that.
If you were a drug kingpin,
Yeah.
let's see what was recently watched though.
Yeah.
Recently watched.
What'd you watch?
Man, like we were talking off camera. Bro.
Yep.
I was telling Jay, I've watched more movies in the past month than I did in like the last 10 years. Just based off of Joe's recommendations.
Oh, there's a list going, huh?
There's a list
Yeah.
going, and let's just pick one of them. The most recent one we watched was Reservoir.
Reservoir Dogs.
In the list, in the span, yeah,
Yep.
Reservoir was one of the
Yep.
the ones that I watched. But yeah, Joe suggested that one, and man, all these movies don't disappoint, Jay.
Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, so this is Ray is, it's funny because when it comes to film, I think Ray appreciates everything that happens behind the lens. So when he watches a movie,
Yes.
he can really see, like, okay, the cinematography. I like the
Yeah.
way that they introduced this segment. Like the way that sound and soundtrack plays into
Yeah.
everything. I know you can pick up on all of these technical aspects of the film,
Yeah.
but for me, I think as a fan, I just look at like the end product. So
Mm.
you're looking at it from two different viewpoints, but I know Tarantino is just kind of a master filmmaker, at this point, and I know a lot of those movies on there you hadn't seen before.
No,
what
not-
would you say is your favorite Tarantino movie thus far?
Thus far,
Yeah.
I mean, Pulp was
It's hard to beat.
yeah. So the ones I've watched, let's start off with that. Is Pulp,
Okay.
Reservoir, and Kill Bill.
Okay,
There's probably
you saw
more-
1 and 2 or just one?
Just one.
Okay.
Which is amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a memorable one.
Yep.
Are there other ones that I missed, Joe? That I
Yeah.
mentioned?
Did you watch Inglorious Bastards yet?
No, that's the one I gotta watch.
I
Yeah.
think that might be. Oh gosh, it's really hard because it's definitely top 3 for me.
Yeah.
But Inglorious Bastards you'll really enjoy. Yeah, I mean, I think what's cool about Tarantino is he's found a way to incorporate humor and ultraviolence and somehow make it work. Like those are two very different subject matter. You can't really put a comedy and ultraviolence together, but somehow he's created his own genre, right? And it comes into this own unique product that he puts out. But Reservoir Dogs, though, what'd you think about? Like, did you like the dialogue? Or
Yeah, no, it's so good. That's probably like one of the first movies that I've watched that's super heavy on dialogue.
Yep.
I know movie buffs will have a list in their head of like a huge list, but I'm just like, that's the first one that I've seen with like a bunch of dialogue in it. I don't want to say a bunch of just like a dialogue based movie. But man, yeah, it was just so good. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but in one of the scenes, it seems like, I don't want to say template, but the way that it was written or laid out was that there's one, they put it in like batches. So
Okay.
this batch is like a scene and they worked like heavy on it.
Yep.
And then they made another batch like and another scene with like heavy just put like heavy work in it. That's how I felt the movie go.
Yes.
Versus just like a slow move.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think when I think about how I'm trying to explain this is the scene where Samuel and John Travolta, go into
In Pulp Fiction, you're talking about.
Pulp. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh yeah. Oh shoot, bro. I'm not.
Are you switching the movies? Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
switching
yeah,
the movies.
yeah.
But I guess based off on Tarantino.
Yep.
With Pulp Fiction, there was a scene where they're in the car. So yeah, even the car drive was a whole scene.
Oh, for sure.
And then the next heavy scene was when they were on their way to the hotel room.
Yep.
And even that dialogue was just like, that dialogue was meant for that, and this dialogue was meant. That's how I see his type of writing goes.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, same thing with Reservoir. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's how I feel. It feels like Tarantino movies are like that.
No.
Yeah.
Did you watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood yet?
No,
Not yet. Okay.
no.
So that's another good one. I just liked it because you got Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio together, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But there's one specific, it's really funny. There's a segment of the movie where it's about a 20-30 minute bit, and then the payoff is just a one line punch basically.
Okay.
And it's just he tells an entire story just for the punchline of a joke, but it's literally about a 20-minute bit, and it's just so funny because of the lead up.
Yeah.
And then when you realize the punch, you're just like, this guy, and you have to chuckle. Like, no matter how dumb it might seem that he spent so much time detailing it, it's really funny.
That's exactly what it is.
But that's
exactly what it is. Yeah.
usually the formula for most of his movies, where he'll build something up and then it'll connect into something else as a part of the movie.
Yeah.
And it's so minuscule when it comes
Yes.
to why he puts so much detail into it.
Yeah.
But that's really, I think, where he's a master at, because when you think about like just real life in general, like you put so many time and attention and details into something that really doesn't matter that much.
Right.
We were
Yeah.
just talking about that earlier.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's how it feels like. It's exactly that. Because I remember that scene where they're walking towards the hotel room.
Yes.
And then it's a one-liner.
Yep.
And I was like, I think that's what makes me think each scene is
Yeah.
is like that. But yeah, that's totally it, Jay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I if you haven't seen Inglorious yet, I think that should be your next watch. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's phenomenal, and then I think the only other ones, you still got to watch Kill Bill 2. Then, if you watch Kill Bill 1,
I've probably seen it, but
Yeah.
didn't remember it. I probably have to rewatch it.
it's not as good as the first. I think what's cool about the Kill Bill series is there's a lot of Easter eggs that go into greater detail in some of his other movies. It flushes itself out, so you can kind of see that he's built like this encapsulated storyline with his
Yeah.
own universe. Where I'm not sure if you picked up on this yet, but one kind of common knowledge one, Michael Madsen's character in Reservoir Dogs.
Who's that, bro?
I want to say I think his. God, somebody's gonna kill me if they. He's not Mr. Pink. I think he's Mr. Blonde.
I don't know how people would remember this,
Yeah.
bro. Like,
So he's
is this the psychotic?
the one that cuts the guy's ear off.
Yeah, okay, the
Okay.
psychotic
So
monster. Yeah.
he is Vincent Vega's brother. That's kind of canon. So Vincent Vega is John Travolta's character. Those two are
Gotcha.
brothers. They don't show up because obviously
Wait. In real life?
no,
okay.
no, in the movies. So even though Pulp Fiction is happening and it's a completely separate storyline,
Yeah.
those two characters are brothers. They never share screen time together, which is pretty
What?
awesome. Yeah, they're the Vega brothers. So Quentin Tarantino built this entire storyline off of these two brothers that never ever share the screen together.
What in the world?
But if you know that going in, you see some of the tendencies that both of them have, and it makes a little bit sense.
What? That's crazy.
There's like this cigarette brand that shows up in every movie that he created. I want to say it's called Apple cigarettes or something like that. One really cool one that was in Kill Bill. People wonder why they had that entire anime segment for Oren, because Oren was actually supposed to be a separate movie.
Oren is
Oren is Lucy Liu's character,
gotcha,
the
okay.
Yakuza boss. So what's interesting in itself is they built this character who's half Japanese Chinese, just like me. So I was like, oh, awesome, my people.
Yeah.
You know? And then she wasn't accepted by the Yakuza because she was half Chinese, right?
Yeah.
But the story, you watch all the different assassins, they spend so much time on her story. It's because that was actually supposed to be a separate
Another.
story in itself.
Interesting.
And they built that segment into her. That's why she's probably the most hyped up character in the entire Kill Bill series. But yeah, so he's got these ideas. He wanted to do 10 movies. That's his goal. He wanted to
Yeah.
cap it at 10. He's at 9. So technically,
So
he's got
gonna
one more
retire
movie.
soon. Yeah.
I don't think he's really going to retire because I think there's just too much things going on in his brain.
Yeah.
But that's just the level of ideas that this man has, where even in his movies, he can't. I can only imagine what ends up on the cutting room floor, Yeah.
When I think when you said going back to the idea that the Vincent Vega
Yep.
or the Vega brothers,
Vega Brothers, yep.
bro, who else does that?
Yeah, man.
That's such a crazy
Yep.
That's such a crazy idea.
Yeah.
Never heard of, never knew about that.
Samuel Jackson's character is Jules. He shows up in multiple movies, and obviously Samuel Jackson's kind of just one of Quentin Tarantino's muses. But there's this idea that maybe he's playing different versions of himself, or he's just assumed a different identity after Pulp Fiction and just shows up in different storylines. Because he kind of just leaves, right? That's the idea. He's trying to leave the life, and then he might just show up in these other movies as a different version. But yeah, man, there's you can go down a rabbit hole in YouTube as far as just all these different theories people have about the stories.
You know what? Now that you're saying it, he just kind of leaves. It's funny because the two movies that I've seen, which was Pulp and Reservoir, it ended just like nonchalant, like
Yep.
and I'm like, oh, that's it. And so I'm in my head, I was like, I guess that's cool.
Yeah. Yep.
But now I think about it, okay, maybe it's he has a bigger picture.
It is.
He has an idea.
What's cool is this idea of just having like an anthology where you have actors playing different characters, right? But he tends to use a lot of the same actors in his movies.
Right.
And I think he just realizes that these actors are playing different characters, but they're still different versions of people within this world that he's created. You know, like I think that he's a very, very good storyteller. And yeah, I'm kind of curious to see what this 10th final movie will be of his.
Man, yeah, it's probably gonna be hyped up, right?
Oh, guaranteed.
Yeah.
Everything is done. I mean, last one that he did was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So yeah, I think it'll be big for sure.
Man, yeah. What else? The recent movie that I saw too, which I think I texted you about, was Daniel Day-Lewis.
Okay, yeah.
There will be blood. Yeah,
Excellent movie.
Isn't that the one that you?
Yeah.
Bro, that's okay. That's the first movie that I paid for in a long time.
Yep.
I mean, granted, it was $4, but $4 well spent. And like you said earlier, man, it's probably it's. I should have watched it in the movie theaters. Yeah, and that came out. I don't want to get it wrong. Was it 2004?
Yeah.
Looked that up real quick, but dude, that movie is crazy. Daniel Day-Lewis, his performance. I recently watched what's it? Gangs of New York.
Okay.
And I texted Jay about it, and I was like, yo, I totally forgot about Daniel Day-Lewis. But after that performance, he just shot up I don't know if that's fair, but he shot up like my top 3 male movie actors.
Yeah.
Because he was just so good in that. And I was like, okay, I got to do my due diligence and like watch his other stuff just to make sure he's just as good. But man, he's so good. He's so good.
Who else you got up there? You said top 3.
Top 3? It's a Denzel.
Yep.
Denzel.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another one that's coming. That's passing my mind right now. It'll come up. But do you have a top 3 or top 5?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, Daniel Day-Lewis is up there. He's just amazing. Funny thing about him is I think he's probably the best actor working. But I don't know if I enjoy his movies the most. So like someone like, of course, Denzel, for the most part, I enjoy pretty much everything that he puts out.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks is another guy that's just consistent, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of duds in there someplace, but for the most part, pretty consistent with what he does.
Yeah.
Who else is amazing? Bryan Cranston is actually, I know he's known mostly for Breaking Bad, and I don't know if you saw Your Honor. He does a lot of TV shows, but Bryan Cranston's phenomenal. I think he's a great actor as well. And then, of course, I mean, just personal favorite, can't go wrong with Brad Pitt. I mean, not the best actor, probably one of the most likable performances in anything he does, though. Like, just seems to be having a good time, and I like that.
My pastor, when he was in his younger years working in Maui, he had a poster of Brad Pitt in Fight Club.
Nice.
And he's just super ripped in, right?
Yep.
And that was his motivation to
get in shape.
Yeah.
Did it work?
Bro, that's when hydroxycut was in.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Bro.
Yeah.
But that was a time that was big. It's funny, he didn't take it, but we were talking about, because that was a time when hydroxycut was huge.
Yep.
But eventually he got what do you call it? Phased. I want to say it phased out. They probably got sued or something.
I know it's not good for you. I'm pretty sure it's not good for you. But
yeah.
yeah.
But Brad Pitt, yeah, Fight Club, his poster was in his bed. But Brad Pitt, what's another, bro? It's gonna fly over my head, but I know there's
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale, yeah, Christian
Yep.
Bale.
Christian Bale's amazing.
Female actors right now. I wouldn't say right now, but your top ones right now. It's hard to say.
I like Jessica Chastain a lot.
Who's this?
She's a redhead. She's been in quite a few movies. One of the movies that I really liked her in, that a lot of people don't know about, is A Most Violent Year. And actually, that's also starring another one of my favorite actors, Oscar Isaac. So, there's a lot. I mean, I don't think you can say, like, with actors, it's like movies, right? There's just too many.
Yeah, and then you have a preference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
But then, you do have your preference, and then you have your actual acting skills, and I think that's what solidifies Daniel Day. Because every time I watch a movie, it'll, when it's bad because it stands out.
Yep.
But then when it's like just super good, you're just so focused on the story and that you didn't even realize, like, oh man, his thing is so good.
Yep.
I mean, there's different ways you can think about it, but that's one way that I consider a really good actor is like when you watch a movie and it's like it's just supposed to be like that. If that makes sense.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
I get it.
Yeah.
Tom Hardy, another one.
Tom Hardy.
Yeah. Forgot about him. Yeah. Awesome.
Tom Hardy. What's his what movies are you in? Besides the
Dark Knight Rises, aside from Bane, Tom Hardy he's done a lot of really good stuff. So again, I think some of his better stuff people don't know about. So there's a movie called The Drop that he's really good in. He was great in Peaky Blinders. Trying to think.
I didn't know he was in Peaky.
Oh yeah, he had a really good role in Peaky Blinders.
What would you rate that Peaky Blinders, the series? Did you go through the whole thing?
I think I didn't get the last season for whatever reason. But Peaky Blinders is a great show. I like it because it's a period piece, and it's got enough going on to keep your attention. I like the way they dress. I like the way they talk. I think the accents are cool. But yeah, it's a cool gangster story, kind of just told from a different perspective. A lot of times you just hear about like the American crime sagas, and interesting to hear about it from other countries. British crime stories are actually really, really fascinating. Real fascinating.
British crime, never. I think I watched the first few, but I don't know why I didn't get into it. Or
well, what's really interesting, and this is completely kind of a subtopic, but what's interesting is when you look at the way crime is depicted in other countries. You oftentimes you don't realize how the introduction of firearms plays into the American crime story, like specifically, right?
Sure.
So you look at places like London, you look at Asia, firearms are really hard to get a hold of. And because of that, crime is very different. A lot of it is unseen. A lot of it is white collar. And, even though there's a lot of vicious, violent element to it, you don't hear about like mass shootings and stuff like that, like how you do in America. So that's kind of interesting. So when you look at like just the crime genre, when you talk about movies, gangster movies from like London and like, Korea and whatnot, a lot of times it's just very different. A lot of stabbings. A lot of beatings and stabbings. So not saying that it's not violent. It is extremely violent, but it's just interesting thinking about that because, the gun epidemic is very unique to America. And that's kind of really, really, when you talk about how that frames how a lot of the stories are told, it's based off of the idea that, guns play such a huge element in the crime sagas. Yeah.
It's funny because when you're talking, in my head, I'm like, oh, that reminds me, I have to watch Old Boy.
That's another one. That's another really good one.
I hear there's an epic hallway fight.
Yes.
In that, so looking forward to that. I've been looking around, but on Apple TV, they're remastering it from what I've understood.
If I'm not mistaken, Old Boy might be 20 years old, which is crazy because it still holds up really, really well.
That might be why the reason why they're remastering it. Maybe for a 20.
I think they did anniversary. It's 4K. I don't know if they're going to re-release it, but they're definitely remastering it. And yeah, that's one of those movies that I definitely got to watch. Cinematography wise, story wise, it's wild. It's. I mean, you don't do revenge stories better than the Koreans. I don't know.
Oh,
It's good.
you had there's a what do you call
The Han, man.
what the Han man?
The Han.
What is it? What is it? The Han?
I'm not Korean, but I don't want to butcher this. It's this vengeful energy
Oh,
that
okay.
you carry, right?
I've heard about, yeah.
and it motivates you. So I think it can serve a positive purpose when utilized correctly.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that you're not gonna get over me type of thing, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
In Asian, I think there's in Japan they also have these. I don't. Is that an idea or a word that describes these feelings or?
I'm sure. Well,
Because I've heard multiple times like different ones from Koreans and Japanese.
it's interesting. I think Asian culture, because a lot of emotions, I mean, let's be honest, they get repressed. You know, I don't think it's encouraged the way it is in American society,
For
Western
sure.
society,
Yeah.
to express emotions of frustration, depression, and then you look at like a lot of these things that we are able to kind of articulate better as far as like I'm feeling these things.
Yeah,
A lot of times
yeah.
in Asia, it's not really encouraged to do so. So it's interesting that there would be like a word to kind of just encapsulate that entire thing, like
Yeah.
just like a entire bundle of emotions. But I totally can see it, and you can see it in their art. I think a lot of
Yeah.
times when it comes out, it's repressed emotions and feelings, and you can put it into an art form, and you're like,
100%.
that was crazy.
Yeah, yeah. There's a scene that or somewhere online I seen that in their graduation you can dress up as anything like
Oh,
in your
Japan.
costume.
Yeah, man. That's
and I've
dope.
seen some of the stuff. I'm like, this is exactly what you were talking about. It's like, man, there's some crazy stuff. And
Well, yeah, I think it's an invitation to be like, okay, do whatever you want
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
If any time, today's your day, and
Yeah.
I think it's kind of cool that they do that.
yeah, there's got to be release somehow.
You know, like it's interesting. I think we've talked about this before. There has to be a balance. I feel like, and this is just me personally speaking, but I feel like in America, I think it's amazing that we've been able to encourage just really exploring these emotions, feelings, and having people feel comfortable being able to live in that. And I think that's a good thing. But I also feel like it opens a lot of doors at times where levels of sensitivity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like I think that people coming into their own emotions and processing those emotions are very important. And I think it's a very individualistic journey where I think this is something that people have to go through and they need to figure it out on their own. But there's also some sort of entitlement and expectation that the rest of the world comes along with you on that journey. And I don't know how realistic that is at times.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, yeah, you know, it's real easy to say to each his own, and I know that's not how it works, but I do sometimes question the level of sensitivities that we have in 2023. You know, where you're like, oh, I didn't realize that offended you. Sorry. You know? I just was speaking my mind here. Like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing?
Well, a lot of thoughts in my head, but the one that comes out is, yeah, when you expect the world to kind of just come along with what you're trying to achieve. Is that a good
Yeah,
one, or,
no, I think so. I mean,
or,
and I think this is a good conversation because I think that a lot of times we even now, I mean, we kind of dance around it. I mean, you know, like I think that again, everybody should be entitled to feel however they feel. And for the most part, you know, we live in a society. Do what makes you feel good. Do whatever makes you feel right. You know, be yourself. Be your genuine self. I think that's very important. But we still do have, you know, this societal agreement of what is deemed socially acceptable and whatnot. And I think sometimes people they live outside of that and like, well, I'm just being me. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, then the rest of the world, how do you expect the rest of the world to react to that? You know?
yeah.
But you know, that's something that I think is always interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one. Okay, so I listened to some clips of Jordan Peterson.
Yep.
And I resonate with a lot of things that he says. And to me, if I can equate one line, or if I can sum up what he's trying to do, what I would, how I would answer that is the change should come from you, and you
Yeah.
can make the change versus,
Absolutely.
coming from other people.
Sure.
With that said, one of his things is, or one of the people that he was interviewing mentioned that her vision of this person was just so negative because a lot of people were telling him like, oh no, oh, you listen to this guy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But one of the things that she mentioned was so profound, because she ended up, while she was being interviewed, she was saying that, let me just listen to this thing. And as I'm listening to this guy, a lot of things resonated with her. And what she said was, allow yourself to be curious.
Yep.
And one of the favorite lines from, is it Teddy? Man, I'm blanking out. Soccer,
Ted Lasso.
Apple TV.
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso. Yeah, Ted Lasso. Yeah. Bro, there's a genius scene in a bar where he's challenging the manager's ex-husband. Mm-hmm. But his thing was, he said at the very end was, don't be judgmental, be curious.
Yep.
And I think as we're talking about this, my idea of how I should receive these things of what people are trying to or they're trying to communicate to me is just be curious and try to understand.
Yeah, no, I do want to backtrack a little bit. I think to clarify, that's exactly, I think, the way to approach it. I think that oftentimes the only issue that I come across is if people don't have their own validation, if you don't have your own buy-in, then how can you expect other people to have the same level of buy-in, right? So a lot of times it's accepting validation from others, and that shouldn't be the point of self-expression or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to validate for yourself, and I think that's the most important. And then it kind of transcends, again, if we have the curiosity, then that's where it kind of goes hand in hand. But I think when you try to accept validation from others before you validate yourself, that's where I think some issues lie.
Okay. Yeah, it's so crazy because that's true. And I now think of the weight that validation has.
Sure.
And man, that's so crazy because it's such a heavy thing to be, I don't know, accepted. Would we consider validation as being...
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think of families and how in the Filipino culture, it's like, you try to please your mom. And not just Filipino culture. There's a bunch of cultures that you just try to please your parents. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, then you just kind of feel shunned, and even not shunned, you just feel shamed, and even to the point where you consider taking your own life, which has happened, I'm sure. But it's like, man, the weight of words is so heavy.
It is,
and it's so important to really consider, what you say and how you say it to people,
Yeah.
But in the Asian culture, like you said, that being I don't know, having suppressed those, or with the rules, not rules, but when you don't have a space to express those emotions or your artistic things, it's like, man, I can't imagine it not exploding at some point.
Yeah.
And that's tough because you have to talk through these things, or at least express it in a form.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's why, it starts at home, right? So they always say that, but if you don't have that level of support at home, I think that's where it's really important for us to have good educators that are going to be able to encourage people to think differently, be open-minded and whatnot. It's such a tricky subject because, there are things where, again, like we wonder, like, okay, is this what we should be introducing our children to at an early age? Are these things that are appropriate for the classroom? And I'm not talking about one specific thing. I'm talking about everything, right?
Yeah.
Where like there's one point where you're like, no, I want to expose people to everything that they can so that they can kind of deduce for themselves, make conscious decisions of this is, like what I want to follow. These are the things that I want to learn. These are the things that and this is how I want to be. This is how, these are all very important ideas. And I think there's that frame of thought, which I think is super valid, incredibly valid. But there's also this very traditional side of me that's just like, okay, well, I think that these are the things that should be taught in the home, not at school, or these are the things that, we should be discussing with our children. And, whether it's values, whether it's ideas, and I think that's for me, not as a parent, because I'm not a parent. I think that's probably the most challenging thing. I think the one thing that my own biases that I've kind of had to put in check at times is because I don't have a child to pass this information on to. So I don't have real relevant world experience in that. The way my family raised me was extremely open-minded. They introduced my sister and I to a lot of very, very open ideas early on, allowed us to come to our own conclusions. And, we never felt judged just based off of the ideas that we the curiosities and the ideas that we had. I think that was always encouraged in my household. And that's something that I think I would want to emulate.
Yeah.
But also there's this level of just protection where I want to make sure like, hey, these are the things that I want to tell my child, like, this is what the real world is. And I want to like preface that there are things that are in the world that are going to be adverse and obstacles and, all of these things, and it's almost like you just want to protect them from these things.
100%.
And again, I think because I don't have children, that's maybe where it lies with me, and I try my best to always be judgment free. But at the same time, people are open to their own opinions. I think that's also very important. I know last time we talked, we talked to the idea of just diverse thought. I think when you have people that just agree with you on everything, you just start having this unconscious bias of this is the right way. And you never question things, and it's always going to be status quo. So I think it is important to be able to have open conversations with people that have different ideas than you. But yeah. That's a whole different can of worms, right?
That's true. But a few days ago, I thought to myself, man, one of the struggles with there's a ton of things going wrong in the world today, but I think one of the things that takes like the upper spots of that list is people not or people is okay. Let me ask this: Is there a right way to disagree, or is that?
Yeah. I mean, I the phrase "agree to disagree" is played out, but it's a valid one, right? I think that whatever your viewpoint is on anything, if you come across somebody that you respect, then you're able to not lose respect for someone just because they have a different opinion. Because I think that's where the problem lies, where if somebody has a different idea as you, that their vision and their idea is not valid, and then therefore it makes them less of a person, or someone that is some kind of like unconsciously like against you, and that shouldn't be the case at all.
And I think that so that's exactly what I was thinking. People don't know how to disagree. They just don't know how to disagree. And I think if people start knowing how to, I mean, I don't know. I have my idea of how to do it, but if that'll be a good start. If we can learn how to disagree.
Sure, absolutely.
Because like you said, it's been played out where it's agree to disagree, but it's totally a good way to proceed on different disagreements. I think, there's obviously some caveats to that. I mean, if someone's getting hurt or
no,
you know what I mean? Like there's these other things, but in the main idea is if we learn how to disagree and be like, okay, that's you. That's cool. Let's continue to hang out.
I had to look up one of my, I didn't want to butcher it, but one of my favorite Anthony Bourdain quotes is, I don't have to agree with you to like you or respect you. Right. And that's exactly what it is. I think that just the way, government is set up, unfortunately, it kind of just draws party lines, and you have different ideologies. You know, I say government, but also, unfortunately, I think sometimes religion plays into that as well,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Where you kind of just draw these invisible lines of this is my thought and these are my ideas. And if you are not for that, unfortunately, you're against me, which shouldn't be the case. You should be able to look at things objectively and be like, well, I believe this, but you believing that doesn't impact me whatsoever.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like if anything, that's interesting that you feel that way. Let me tell
Yeah.
you about how I feel, and maybe we can come to a middle ground.
Yeah.
But you know, like that, it sounds so simple, and but it's not, right?
It's not. Yeah. Yeah. I laugh because every time someone asks me something with them expecting me to answer a certain way,
Sure.
I'm like, I can't answer that because this is one aspect
Yeah.
out of the millions of things that happen within this subject.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you can't just base your feelings off of me, feelings
Sure.
on me off
Sure.
of what I say with this one thing. Like you gotta give me all the pieces, bro.
Sure.
And then we can talk about it.
Can I tell you something? My observation of you. One of the reasons why I think you and I are good friends. I respect that you're a man of faith, and I probably told you this before, but I wanna make sure that I make this point. Like, I think that the way you view your faith and how important it is to you and your family, and what role it plays in the way you're raising your children, but also just the way that you navigate through life. I think it's very admirable. But I also like that you're not judgmental. I like that you understand that people do have different ideas that may be outside of your faith or maybe different than the ideologies that you grew up with, and you can still respect that and still have a conversation and learn something from people. And I think that's such an important thing. And I think for me, growing up Christian with my family, it's interesting because now that I'm, not actively participating in the church, I still believe in faith, and I think it's very important. But I also do realize that there are so many things that I question, not necessarily in a negative way, but also like I'm always wanting to learn more about others. Like, why do you feel that way? Or like, tell me about this. Or that's interesting that, like you see things that point of view. Can you explain that? And I think that's important for anybody, regardless. And I think that's something that you do that I wish more people would. I think when people get turned off on religion in general, whatever religion it is, it's because they see it as immovable. Like this is the word, and nothing else matters. And I do understand that is kind of the basis of faith. But I think in modern times, you need to look at it like the world is so big, and we are such a small part of it. Like there's so much more going on outside of what we know.
Right.
And I think what makes us a complete human is wanting to know more about others. Right. And that's something that I really admire about you. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
That means a lot, bro. I hate that about other people in faith.
Sure.
It's like they think, and they're just, I wouldn't say, they're just not sensitive to the other person's beliefs or how they're forming their thing. And yeah, man, there's a bunch of them. I see them all everywhere, all around. I know a few of them. I'm just like, you can't, that's not, if you're trying to communicate something to someone and letting them know this is what saved my life. Shunning them or just being so abrupt and like very closed off is not the way to do it. That's just not the way to do it. And I've seen it so much in my life, Jay. I'm just like, man, it makes me reflect on like, okay, am I doing things right, or am I just doing things right? Because so one good example, bro, and I get it, is street preaching. I'm just like, I get it, but I get it. Like, I just don't think that's the best way to do it. And then there's the aspect of the time that we're living in. And it's like, what do you call it? There was a line where it was like, what was it? Like, you have to build a different bridge now because it doesn't work. So if you're trying to cross something, you got to update your bridge somehow. The way that you communicate things, because times change, and it's not gonna be the same. What worked in that era was perfect for the time that it was in.
Yeah.
But now it's like, if you're trying to get something across, or if you're, see, that's not even the point in my head, is trying to get something across. It's just loving other people.
Yeah.
And it's
yeah.
like, how do you do that when you tell them off? And you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the from what I do understand, most religion was set up with the idea that this is temporary, and there's more to life than this. I think the basis of most religions is that, right? But the idea of that is, I want to bring as many people along on this journey, right? So again, regardless of your faith, this is what most religions are set up as.
Yeah.
So when you have these exclusionary thoughts of like, no, I don't like you because of this, or because you think this way,
Yeah.
you're excluding people from that. And
Right.
I think it kind of just contradicts the message, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, man, like, can we, if we disagree on one thing,
Yep.
and can still hang out the next week?
Yep.
Like, I think that's solid. So
No,
I've
yeah,
seen
man.
I've seen a few people like that.
yeah.
And I'm like, bro, that's solid. Like,
I think what's really important, again, is it's just a level of respect, right? Like, yeah, I think for me growing up, and I know I've shared this with you, I would go to church every Sunday with my mom, and my sister and I, we were as devout as our options were, and at the time, I think my mom really wanted to raise us Christian, and I think that at a certain age, she gave us the choice of like, do you want to continue this or not? And I think what was interesting was, I always loved the idea of believing that there is something more, and I always believe that if any faith can make you live your life to what you believe is righteous and as best to your abilities, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a positive thing. My mom is still very faithful, and I think that it's good because it's structured her life and given her a lot of hope in moments where maybe she didn't have that. And I think that's super important.
Right.
So in that sense, I think it's really good. But again, for me personally, I don't believe you need to, and maybe this is just me, trying to make myself feel better about the situation, but I personally don't believe that I need to go to a structure weekly to just be able to just say like, hey, I'm thankful for the things that I have.
Yeah.
I feel like I can do that here. I can do that any day, anytime. And that's just the way that I view it.
Sure.
But and again, I know that might turn a lot of people off. I know I have some friends that are very religious that might be like, no, that's not how it works. And I totally agree with that, but I don't feel like it makes me less of a person to feel that way.
But it's funny because some super devout will see
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think the goal, regardless of your religion, is if your goal is to just be the best version of yourself, show up, take care of your responsibilities, hold yourself accountable, and again, try to just live the best life that you can without impacting and impeding others in a negative way. That's all anybody really can ask for, right? Regardless of whatever religion you are, or if you even if you're not religious at all. If you can do these things, live within a society, and contribute and be productive, and just be a good person in general. I don't see why you should draw issue with that.
That's a good basis to follow.
Yeah.
To make a harmonious life.
Man. It's interesting. It's really interesting. I don't know. I always thought this was like one of those things that it's just, it doesn't need to be such a heated argument, yet it always turns into that. So it's interesting when you can kind of just have a dialogue like this. And, just have different, not even opposing, but just different points of view on things.
Right.
And just be like, yeah, that's valid.
Yeah.
Period.
And that's what I'm talking about with like, and even disagreeing with might be a stronger weight or sway, but even just having a conversation without being emotional.
And that's, so this is another thing, right? Where emotions, I think that you have emotional thought and you have rational thought. And I think that, as adults, it's inevitable. Emotion will always come into play. But I think a lot of times we're taught to be overly emotional about things sometimes.
Maybe,
where you attach an emotion to something, and then this is no matter what, this is how it is, and you're like, well, but rationally, like, is it the way that it is? Because rationally, like, there are other ways to approach things and view things and do things that might have the same amount of validity, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you think about just in my faith and being rational, that's a struggle in my faith.
Yep.
It's because there's this side of believing who God is and having faith in Jesus, but at the same time, my flesh is telling me like these things need to align, but
Yep.
sometimes it doesn't.
Yep. Yep.
And I struggle with that.
Sure,
I struggle with
sure.
that. There's things that that I'm like, okay, but how come this is the way it is, and you know,
Sure.
and those are struggles that I go through, and being rational with it almost, I mean, in my mind, and how I view it is, I mean, that's the whole idea of faith, is like believing in something that's
Yep.
that you
Yep.
can't see, or just having complete faith in it.
Yeah.
And that's the whole struggle.
No, I mean, but I think what's cool is, again, just having discourse, right? So human nature to question things, human nature to be like,
Yes.
well, that doesn't make sense, or I want to learn more about this. And I think that's where opposing points of view come into play, not necessarily to sway or enforce, but just to allow you to have more information, period.
Right.
I think that's the most important thing. I think, like, for you, again, knowing how important religion is to you personally, I think it's cool that you can kind of talk about this openly. Where you're just talking with a friend, and that I might have questions about things, or this might be my view on things, and again, it might be different than yours, but this is important to have this kind of conversation, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's kind of a complete sidetrack there. I think we kind of just started talking about Quentin Tarantino and ended up on Christianity. So that kind of shows you how this pod will go.
Yep.
But
And yeah, that's probably gonna be the close up for this episode.
yeah.
Episode 1. There'll be more of these.
Absolutely. I think what's really cool is just being able to talk about what's going on, what's on our mind. And again, I think that we were just talking about how Ray and I are just pretty easygoing guys, and you're not going to hear too much dramatics on here or anything like that. But I think it's always interesting to kind of just talk about things that might not always come up in the dinner table conversation. I think that's important topics.
Yeah, and I'm excited for future ones. And if you made it this far, guys, thanks for hanging out with me and Jay. There'll be more.
Yeah, till next time.
Till next time.
Take it easy.
Right on.